the extent of the Roman Empire. Time has seen the rise and fall of a number of great empires, the Babylonian, the Assyrian, the Egyptian, and lastly, the Persian. Regardless of the size or skill of their army, or the capabilities of their leaders, all of these empires fell into ruin. History has demonstrated that one of the many reasons for this ultimate decline was the empire's vast size. They simply grew too large to manage, falling susceptible to external, as well as internal, forces. One of the greatest of these empires was, of course, the Roman Empire. Over the centuries it grew from a small Italian city to control land throughout Europe, across the Balkans to the Middle East and into North Africa. It is, unfortunately, difficult to obtain precise figures on the number of people living at any one time in the Roman Empire. Any calculation of the population would be garnered from the census, but the Roman census may or may not have included women and children below a certain age. The census was used not only to ascertain the population but also to levy taxes and feed the populace, but since the census was based on property and citizenship, one must question who was included in the final tally. Also, slaves were probably not included, but according to one estimate, there were between 1,500,000 and 2 million slaves in Italy in the 1st century BC. In the beginning, before the Roman Republic, the city of Rome had an estimated population of only a few thousand. By the 6th century BC and the exile of the kings, the city had grown to between 20,000 and 30,000 inhabitants. As the city grew along with the empire, Rome became a magnet for artists, merchants, and people of all walks of life, especially those looking for work. At the beginning of the imperial period, the city had close to 1 million residents. The empire during this same time had grown from 4,063,000 inhabitants in 28 BC to 4,937,000 inhabitants in 14 C, that is according to the census. The latter was a point of great pride for the Roman emperor, or so Augustus wrote in his Residential Gesti. Augustus is quoted to have said, "I found Rome built of sun-dried bricks, I leave her clothed in marble." This quote might also reflect the empire's growth in people as well as land. From a small city on the western edge of Italy, Rome, the empire had grown to include territory from the North Sea to most of the region surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. To the north were Britannia, Germania, and Gaul. To the west and southward along North Africa, the empire included Hispania, Mauritania, and Numidia. Eastward and into the Middle East were Egypt, Judea, Syria, Parthia, and Asia Minor. Closer to Italy and to the east were Macedon, Greece, Mysia, and Dacia. Add to this the islands of Corsica, Sardinia, and Sicily. Throughout the Roman Empire, there were cities of 100,000 to 300,000 inhabitants: Alexandria, Carthage, Antioch, Pergamum, Ephesus, and Lyons. However, like all of those before it, the Roman Empire could not endure and finally fell in 476 CE to an invasion from the north. To understand the extent of this great empire, one must return to the beginning in the early 6th century BC. In 510 BC, the monarchy that controlled Rome was overthrown, and the king Lucius Tarquinius Superbus was expelled. From that time onward, Rome continued to grow and spread its sphere of influence throughout the Mediterranean region. Despite both inside and outside forces, the sea became what has been termed a Roman lake. This astonishing growth through the early republic extended into the age of the empire, culminating in the period of the Pax Romana, its version of peace and stability. However, to achieve this immense expansion, Rome became what one historian has called a warrior state. This constant state of war made Rome not only rich but also helped mold Roman society. Its conquest of the Balkans and Greece influenced Roman art, architecture, Roman literature, and philosophy, but the growth would not continue, and in the end, the empire became less a force of conquest and more one of pacification and management. Throughout their wars of expansion, the Romans never considered themselves the aggressor. According to one historian, in their mind, Roman warfare was only meant to subdue enemies that they believed to be a viable threat to Roman integrity. The Roman statesman and author Cicero believed the only reason for war was so Rome could live in peace. The best place to start is at the beginning, the conquest of the peninsula of Italy. After the fall of the monarchy and the creation of the Republic, the city of Rome, for whatever reason, wanted to grow beyond its 7 hills, and this growth meant, first of all, conquering all of Italy. This desire did not go unnoticed by the surrounding communities, and to forestall any possible war, they formed what became known as the Latin League. Their fears came to fruition when war broke out near the city of Tusculum at Lake Regillus. During a well-fought battle, the Roman army was supposedly rallied to victory according to legend by the appearance on horseback of Castor and Pollux, the twin brothers of Helen of Troy. According to the treaty negotiated by Spurius Cassius Vecellinus in 393 BC, the victory resulted in the confiscation and plunder of the Latium lands. And, As an additional condition, the Latium people had to provide Rome with soldiers for any future conflicts. This latter condition would be an addendum to all future Roman treaties. The Latin alliance with Rome helped defeat many of their closer neighbors who had often raided Roman lands, the Sabines, ᴍᴜ and Volsci. Over time Rome took to the offense again, defeating and destroying the ♫. Despite an invasion of the Gauls from the north in 390 BC and the near fall of the city, Rome was able to quickly rebuild and continue its conquest of the peninsula. In the 4th century BC, the Samnites, a group of people to the southeast of Rome, captured Capua, a city located in the Campania, a province just to the south of Rome. Due to a treaty with Rome, the people of Capua appealed to the city for help. So, from 343 to 341 BC, a series of short skirmishes occurred between Rome and the Samnites. As a result, Rome gained control of Campania. However, the conflicts, known as the Samnite Wars, would not end there. During the second series of conflicts from 327 to 304 BC, the Samnite forces defeated the Romans at Caudine Forks in 321 BC. However, they were unable to get Rome to back down. Afterwards, the Samnites made alliances with the Gauls, Etruscans and Umbrians, but during the Third Samnite War, Rome crushed the Samnites and their allies. Next, they made alliances with Apulia and Umbria. They crushed the Hernici and ᴍᴜ as well as the Marsi, Pelagini, Maricini, Frentani and Vestini, former allies of the Samnites. Rome was now the major power of the peninsula, and to secure this power they established colonies throughout Italy. The Romans now turned their eyes to the south. The city of Tarentum, fearing Rome and realizing they were next, appealed to Pyrrhus, king of the western Balkan province of Epirus. Since the city had helped him in the past, the king answered their appeal and sent his army of 21,000 infantry, 3,000 cavalry and 20 elephants to southern Italy. The king proved victorious over Rome twice at Heraclea in 280 BC and Asculum in 279 BC. However, as during the early wars with the Samnites, the Romans would not admit defeat and soon recovered, and at Beneventum Rome was victorious. By 270 BC all of Magna Graecia was annexed by the Roman legions. However, this expansion eventually brought them in conflict with another great city across the sea, Carthage. With an increase in revenue from the conquest of the peninsula, Rome was able to turn its focus further southward and across the Mediterranean Sea to the ancient Phoenician city of Carthage, and from 264 BC to 146 BC the two powers would fight a series of 3 wars, the so-called Punic Wars. Punic was the Roman name for Carthage. The wars began innocently enough when Rome was pulled into the affair by the Sicilian city of Messina, a city, together with neighboring Syracuse, soon to become its ally. The Romans disliked the presence of Carthage on the island, and when Rome reacted to Messina's appeal, war began. Carthage, likewise, resented Roman ambitions in Sicily, and with the hopes of driving the invaders off the island began a series of raids along the Italian coast. Since Rome was more of a land power while Carthage was far more a naval power, the city quickly realized its limitations and began to build a large fleet of ships to counter the Carthaginian advantage. Wisely though, the Romans added a corvus or boarding ramp to each of their ships. The device enabled the Romans to pull alongside their opponents' ships, board them, and convert a sea battle to a land battle. After trading victories, Rome at Mylae and Carthage at Drepana attempts to negotiate a treaty failed. Following further Roman victories, in 241 BC Carthage sued for peace. Not only did the defeated city have to pay tribute, but Rome also gained the island of Sicily. This was its first province outside the peninsula. Rome would later seize the islands of Sardinia and Corsica. The Second Punic War began as Carthage expanded its presence in Spain, something that would ultimately alarm the Roman Senate. An earlier treaty between Rome and Carthage had fixed a border between the two cities at the river Ebro, but an invasion of the city of Saguntum by Hannibal, son of the Carthaginian general Hamilcar Barca, would change this. Earlier, at the age of 9, Hannibal had promised his father that he would seek revenge against the Romans for the Carthaginian loss in the First War. Because of their focus on the Illyrians and Philip V, Rome initially failed to come to the aid of the city. Hannibal used it as a power base for further incursions throughout Spain and his eventual crossing of the Alps and into Roman territory in 218 BC. This latter move finally pushed the city into action and a war began. Hannibal had accumulated a number of allies as he had crossed the mountains and onto the peninsula, especially the Roman-hating Gauls. Hannibal and his army caused panic throughout Italy, but despite the Carthaginian threat, Rome's allies remained loyal and did not join Hannibal. However, although Hannibal achieved victory after victory, the general did not, for reasons unknown, attack the city of Rome. At the Battle of Cannae, the Romans would suffer one of their greatest defeats, But regardless of the loss, the legions would still not submit. Hannibal remained in Italy for over 15 years. Under the leadership of Fabius Maximus, the Romans avoided further damaging conflicts by using a scorched earth policy. Raiding parties were used and crops were burned. Hannibal and his men grew desperate but heard little in the way of assistance from Carthage,